Welcome to episode 11 of Athena Rising, where we pose 36 questions to powerhouse female lawyers. Why 36? Well, that's the number of states that were required to ratify the 19th Amendment and give women the right to vote and take power into our own hands.
Our guest today is Lauren DeSantis Then, a partner at Polsinelli's St. Louis office with a nationwide white-collar and investigations practice.
On this episode, Lauren tells us how she's managed to stay at the same firm her entire career, how she has developed a robust practice, and how she makes time for a cooking show, albeit having 3 children.
We're glad you're tuning into our podcast, whether you're an Athena or an ally. Welcome. Ladies, let's rise.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Athena Rising. My name is Vanessa Johannes. I'm a white-collar lawyer and government investigation attorney here at Carlton Fields.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Marisol Descalzo. I'm a criminal defense attorney working in the white-collar space as well. I have my own firm here in Miami, Taché, Bronis, and Descalzo.
We're glad you're joining us for another episode of Athena Rising. Today, we have Lauren DeSantis Then on. Lauren is currently a partner at Polsinelli in St. Louis. Lauren, welcome to our program.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to get right to it with our 36 questions. You know our format, and we're ready to go. You ready?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay. Now, you're also a white-collar and government investigations attorney at Polsinelli. You have worked on an array of cases, from everything healthcare fraud, conservation easements, fraud in every space and area, it seems like. Tell us a little bit more about your practice and how it manages to be so diversified.
So my practice is all investigations related. And because there's, obviously so many different agencies of the government, we get hit with everything. So, I primarily probably about the last 5 years focused on healthcare, doing about 95% of my cases there. But it really just ranges on what's going on with the government, where are they focusing and who they're going after. And so recently I'm doing a lot of work with DOJ tax related to the syndicated conservation easement investigations, which a lot of people might not know about, but essentially they're like real estate deals where different funds would buy land and people would buy into the fund and then donate the land for conservation purposes and get deductions. And so there's a lot of enforcement going on in that area. So I really get calls where anywhere the government is tending to go after people. So some environmental stuff, some government contracting work, healthcare, False Claims Act stuff, really anything. If the government shows up, usually I get a call.
Interesting. So Lauren, I looked at your bio and I don't believe you were ever a prosecutor.
Nope.
Is that right? And I was never a prosecutor. So how did you get into the white collar space without being a prosecutor? Because that's usually, the track that most people go.
That is funny. And I like earlier in my career, I thought about that. And I also thought, like, is this the right path to go without being a prosecutor? Because are people going to hold that against me later or something like that? And my husband, I talked to him a lot about this because he actually started his career at Williams & Connolly. And Williams & Connolly is like one of the preeminent white collar firms. And he always pointed out to me, like, Williams & Connolly doesn't take laterals and they are strictly a defense white collar firm. So they don't take anyone from the government or anything like that. So it's kind of funny because they're one of the leading firms in that area. So it gave me the confidence to think that even if you weren't a prosecutor, you can still do this. And I think you learn the defense side from within the firm. So I started off with general litigation. And when I started with Polsinelli, there were about 150 lawyers. This was back in 2005, 2006. Now we have like almost 1,000 lawyers. So as the firm grew, our practices got more complex and sophisticated. And so also a lot of it stemmed from our healthcare group growing. And with the healthcare group, there became a lot of fraud. So I was at one of the big retreats with the firm, and we had just merged with another firm and got a new group that did government investigations and white collar crime. And I met the leader of it there, and he was like, we're so busy. I was an associate at the time, and he's like, we could really use the help. Would you have any interest in joining our team? And kind of told me about it. And it was very, a lot of the skills that you learn in litigation apply with investigations. And so I jumped on the opportunity, and like basically as the firm grew, our practice grew, I got really involved in the area and really learned to love it a lot more than just general litigation, because I like a lot of it from the investigation side, I think is more informal in terms of like you're doing an interview instead of a deposition. And so there's not as many rules, which
right.
I mean, obviously when we go to court, there are rules, but a lot of it, like I always think of it, if we're doing a great job on the front end, hopefully we don't go to court because we can back the government off and either settle or just get them to go away completely. So a lot of the stuff is happening on the front end with just, more informal investigation techniques, and also just kind of like, I always feel like I'm trying to figure out what really happened, because there's the government's version, and then there's your client's version, and then there's everything in between. And so
Right.
like, it's almost like you're solving a mystery, like what actually happened. So
Where's the truth?
yeah. And it's usually somewhere in the middle.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. You said that you're investigations focused. Do you primarily do investigation, or is that all you do? Do you ever represent individuals who may get charged? Let's say the company gets charged or the CEOs get charged and it stems out of an investigation. Do you all also do that sort of work, or is it just the investigations that you participate in?
Oh, yeah, both. But I mean,
Okay.
investigate, like sometimes they are investigating an individual too. And then representation, like I do witness representation in terms of like, they get a grand jury subpoena, helping them. Maybe we do a proffer session. Also, there might be an investigation where the government's going after a company and then realizes they want to go after the individual, maybe the CEO of the company or the CFO or something like that. So, I mean, a lot of times it turns into
Right.
individual representation, even if they started going after the company.
Does Polsinelli keep the individuals even if it was representing the company at some point?
Yeah, as long as there's not a conflict. So it really depends on the situation. Some companies are smaller, and like the president and the owner essentially like is the company. So, at that point, it's not really conflict. There could be a conflict if, there's company liability and individual liability and they're different. And then at that point, we would refer the client to, find them a good lawyer that we could also, work in connection with.
Plays well in the sandbox.
Yeah.
We all live that world.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm curious, and I asked this more from, I mean, I understand this and Marisol understand this because we practice in this area, but sometimes corporate or transactional attorneys find it very hard to understand how investigations and, white collar lawyers do kind of everything, and how we're generalists. We do healthcare fraud, we do tax fraud, any fraud, you bring to us. I think for our audience, if you can help them understand, how do you serve as a generalist in the white collar area? How do you get up the learning curve when you have a new topic or area that you're focusing on? For example, you just mentioned conservation easements. How do you start learning about that and really focus your work as it changes subject area?
Well, a lot of times we lean in with some of our subject matter specialists in the firm. So for instance, like with the tax stuff, we pulled in some of the tax group for anything tax specific. They help us, point us in the direction to get us up to speed on the, substantive area of the law. Same with healthcare. Like if it's like, a DME investigation for durable medical equipment, we have people that specialize in that particular area. So we might get them, pointing us in the right direction of where we should go to look at the law, figuring out where they're going on that. But then the investigation piece is really the same across the board. Like what happened, we got to go in, we got to review the relevant documents. We have to talk to the witnesses that are going to be involved and really kind of dig in and figure out where are the problem areas, what are our defenses, what really happened and how we can create the strategy around that. That's all the same. And then you just apply that to the different industry. And, we rely on the different industry specialists, but then, I always go and try to dig in. So like with the conservation easements, I pulled like the Senate Finance Committee report and, one of the big cases that's going to go to trial in Atlanta, the other criminal indictment, the Fisher case, and just started reading everything I can about that particular area to really become an expert. Which is also really fun because you get to kind of learn about something like a new area of the law. Like I like that, like the diversity of it.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't realize that fraud is fraud. At the
Right.
end of the day, when you're in this world, yes, the client may differ and
Yeah.
the focus may differ, but fraud is fraud.
Right.
And that's kind of what grounds the work that we all do. And so
Right.
yeah, that explains a lot of how you structure your investigations.
Now, Lauren, you graduated from Duke Law. What set you down the path to go to big law following law school?
Well, there's all this debt when you come out.
We went to Duke together and graduated together. So I understand.
Yes.
I understand that debt.
Yes, I think you really feel that when you graduate. You're like, oh my gosh, I owe all this money back. And then you're like looking, no. So, I mean, there's that obviously, but also I think one of the biggest things that everybody kind of tells you, and I think also is true, is that you learn so much at a big law firm, like coming out of law school, like you have the tools, right? So you know how to research, you know how to find things, but you really don't know like the practical aspects of like just practicing law and what that means and all the things that you just learn from observing. And so I think when you go into big law, like you're practicing with people that are at such a high level and just like learning their styles and like how they do things. And then I learned a ton from the staff, like all the paralegals, like they know how to find things and get things done, like these just the skills that like, yeah, you might know constitutional law and how to look this up, but like what happens when you win and you need to collect a judgment? Like, oh, wait, I don't know how to do, like, and they know how to do all that stuff and figure all that out. So you really learn so much because you're exposed to so much. And also like, I mean, a lot of big law firms offer a ton of training. So you're also just like absorbing, it's almost like more law school, but like an internship, but learning on the job. So I think for anybody that is in that position and like looking to like, what do I want to do? Even if you want to do something with like public service eventually, like I do think that going to a firm for a while is a great background, just with being able to learn all those skills up front. And I think that that's where I was going with it. And then, you kind of get in and I mean, I definitely considered like, do I go to the government for a while? Do I stay here? And I just kept getting new opportunities. And I think a lot of it happened to be with the way the firm grew, because it did really, it's almost like being at a different firm, because when I started, like, again, there was like 150 lawyers. So going from that to like this big firm, it changed the work. The people have changed a ton. So I've gotten to work with a lot of different people. And then, you really do get a lot of complex and interesting work to dive into. And so that's kept me interested. And then as I've grown as an attorney with being an associate and then working my way up to become a shareholder, and learning the aspect of client development and like building my own client relationships, that's been extremely rewarding, just to like have my own clients now and like get to kind of navigate like how we're going to manage it. And I find that, definitely the most rewarding part of the job and the most fun. And, in a way, I think we kind of, I think especially investigations, because some people are going through like the worst time of their life. Like if the government's coming after you and you're potentially like facing losing your freedom, I almost feel like I serve as a counselor in a way. I mean, I talk to people about everything going on, their feelings, and like just really kind of trying to be a calming presence and take on some of that for them and help them navigate it and tell them, no matter what, everything's gonna be okay, but letting them vent, and really developing those personal relationships with people. So,
we're certainly part therapists.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, and I do think in the beginning for somebody starting off, like, yeah, you don't know what's going to be thrown at you as a young associate. I mean, you don't want to get stuck on like a big doc review for 5 years. Like you want to try to get those other opportunities with, and hopefully, if firms are doing a good job, they're finding you a mentor and, helping, shepherd you to the right path and getting you all the good experiences that are going to help you along the way.
You stayed at Polsinelli your entire career,
Yeah.
which is unusual, especially
Yeah.
these days when lawyers do move around quite frequently. I'm curious about your path being there from associate to partner. You shed a little bit of light on it, talking about the growth of the firm, and how big it's become. I mean, you even have an office now in sunny Miami, beautiful one at that.
Yeah.
But can you tell us a little bit about, the trials, tribulations along the way from associate to partner, and, lessons learned in that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it wasn't always easy. I think the biggest challenge that, different challenges that happen along the way are when I was an associate, different partners that left, people in big law, a lot of times go in and out, they either go to another firm or they might go into the government or, who knows what, but a lot of people, they might not be like me. I'm actually when I tell people even within the firm how long I've been with the firm, they're like, oh my God, because
yeah, you're a unicorn.
I think people in big law move around a lot. Where's, we're going to get more money. It was this, that, and so that was hard for me as a young associate because there would be, a partner who would be your advocate that you would be getting mentorship from. And I had one guy that was like that, and he left. He invited me to go with him. And I, contemplated it. And I was like, I chose Polsinelli because I really liked the firm. It wasn't because of him. He wasn't even there at the time. And then when I went and, talked to the other firm, I didn't like the firm. I mean, I liked him, but I'm like, am I going to just tie my career to this one person and do something like that? And ultimately, I talked to the firm about it. They're like, we will, find a path for you if you stay. But so I stayed, and, I would say that year after he left was a really rough year because at the time I was in DC, which was a satellite office. We had probably 15 to 20 attorneys, and, none of them were in my practice area. So I was having to then get work from other offices. And I think in the beginning, it was a bit of a challenge because I was it was almost like starting a new job.
Yeah.
So, that was definitely a challenge. And then, rebuilding, finding new people. Some people aren't always great humans, and you don't, I mean, they might be a good lawyer,
surprise. Lawyers,
but
nice.
not necessarily a good human. And I definitely had some interactions like that, which, were challenging. And, I think that I'd say that is one advantage about big law versus maybe in-house, at least from sharing stories with friends, is that, when you're in-house, you have one client. It's sometimes harder to navigate away if you do have these run-ins with some people that aren't the best people to be around. Whereas in big law, there are more people, and you can try to navigate around people that, maybe aren't the kindest people. I mean, it's a demanding job, right? And so everybody handles that stress in different ways. But I think that there's definitely ways to handle it in a positive way and still get the job done, and everybody's happy to do it. So I think that would probably, I'd say that would be my biggest challenge about staying in the same place, but having all different people come in and out. But now, I mean, we have a great team. I love everybody in my group. Everybody's awesome at what they do, but also just nice people, which I think that just makes a huge difference. At least
it does. We spend too much time at work for that not to be the case. And honestly, it speaks volumes about Polsinelli's culture for you to have stayed that long, to be honest with you.
Did that experience when you didn't have, when the partner leaves that was giving you work and you're kind of, struggling, did that experience drive you to build your own book of business?
It actually did. And so, that is actually when I got one of my first clients that, I don't know if you know her, Vanessa Larissa Melli. She's, she was an LLM at Duke.
Yes.
And, I got a call just randomly. She looked up in the Duke Law Alumni Directory and saw my last name, which I hyphenate it, which is Italian, And then she saw Polsinelli, which is also an Italian name. So she's from Italy. She calls me and she's like, can you help me? Like, there's my friends are in this bind and they're on the plane from Naples right now. Like they have this, dispute with this restaurant in DC, and like, can you help? And I was like, sure. So like these people like get off the plane. They don't speak English. Like luckily one of my colleagues down the hall spoke Italian, and we're in this meeting and like, oh, it's like hands are going everywhere. And I'm like, oh gosh. And, so that was like actually how I got my first client. And then, when all that stuff was happening, I was like, she's actually the general counsel of Leonardo, which is like the largest defense contractor outside of the United States. They sell, military aircraft all over the world. Well, anyway, so at the time, Polsinelli didn't have a government contracting group, but as and she had just kind of started there. And as we grew, she also advanced throughout the company, and we became really good friends. And along the way, she's like, look, I think that I can get you some work in this area. And so, that pushed me to really start trying there. And so, she invited me over to Italy to go meet with the head of their entire legal practice globally, and like the president of the company. And so we went over there and, told them all about what we could do, and ended up getting that business. But it really was because like I think when you get really busy just with work, business development goes on the back burner.
Yes.
Because you're just like so busy. You're like, how do I carve out this time? And so when something like that happens, it does kind of push you like, okay, I'm going to come up with a plan. I can do this. Like, I'm going to show people I can do this. And it doesn't matter like how old I am or, what level I'm practicing. I know I can do this. And so, yeah, I really do think that drove me. And then once I got that client, then it's like, okay, I can do this. And then you figure out like, how to use your skills to do that. And I mean, I love people. So I love going out and talking to people, and like that, I kind of thrive on that, like business development stuff. And so I've tried to use those skills to like actually bring in work. Cause what I don't like doing is I don't like anything like sales related. Like I don't like to say like, oh, can you pay me? Like, like that, So it's like taking those like friendships and relationships, and then, making an ask, like just that next step of that. I think that was the harder part. Like, hey, like if you need legal help, can we help you? Like, and it's just a simple question, but I felt intimidated just to say that. I was like, but then I, finally got
not used to it
to do it. And yeah.
Look, the Do connection's real. I mean, I think part of the reason I got an interview at the U.S. Attorney's Office is a Do connection. So that is a real connection, and that's part of how you network and connect.
Yeah.
Aside from that, how have you managed to generate work and really build your brand, and reach out there? Are there specific organizations you lean on, or what is it that you do to really market yourself?
Well, I think with our area with investigations and white collar, we are able to get a lot of just work through referrals, even within like other law firms and friends that are in the same practice area, which I think is somewhat unique, because I do think like a lot of other areas, they're almost like competitors and they don't have as many conflicts. Like if you get the company and then there's all these individual witnesses that you can help refer to other friends in the area. So I've gotten involved with the Women in White Collar group, which I know you're involved in, Vanessa, and also the one, there's a local one in St. Louis that's been really great. The other thing, like when I got back to St. Louis, so I came back from DC, I was about 6 years ago, and I'm from St. Louis originally, but never been here like professionally, had not been back here since college.
Well, it's very different.
Yeah, it was really like moving to a new city, because I knew this city as a kid, which I was only exposed to certain things. Like I really didn't know the city, I guess, so I had like a good mentor that I met in the St. Louis office, and he's like, I think you should really get involved in this Leadership St. Louis program. And turns out, I mean, this program is national, like it's in every city. which I had never heard of it. I knew nothing about it. And it ended up being like amazing. So what it is, it's like leaders from all over the city that all participate. You apply, and then once you get in, you're like a class. And so with that class, you're doing it for a whole year. And it was like 1 weekend a month. And with that weekend, they basically show you all of the problems, good, bad, everything about the city, and like ways that you can get involved and become a leader. But with that, like it's all of these amazing people from most people are not lawyers. It's people that are high level people at companies in the city. And so with that, I mean, I feel like I have connections of people at every major company here, which is amazing because anything comes up, you have like a friend to call. So I think that was an amazing networking opportunity. I know they have similar things in other cities.
Yeah, Miami has a similar program.
Yeah, and that was great. And with that, then I started into this like international women's mentoring program. So St. Louis really wants to attract people from other countries to come here. We have like a declining population, and so they're really trying to attract people from other countries. And so what we do is we are mentors to people that come to St. Louis to really try to help them integrate within the city and like help them feel like this is home, like learn about it, like be a resource for them. And so that's been really awesome. It's like this great group of people. Like it, you know, my mentee right now is from Brazil. I had another one that was from Israel. And it's, you know, this great group of women that you learn all about different cultures, and like it makes me feel like, because you know, St. Louis can be kind of an insular place, and then coming from DC where there's so much diversity, like it's been really like a really great thing. But I've met a lot of really cool people through that with, I'd say, like branding and like networking. I don't ever think of it as like it's more like developing relationships and friendships, and then you see where that goes. Like
see if business comes from it naturally.
Yeah. Right.
Well, that's the best way to I think network and generate business, because it's real and it's authentic.
Yeah.
I'd love to test out your little St. Louis program, but I can't live in the cold, girl. I can't, can't do that.
Hey, I'm with you. I would like to be by the beach too.
Yes.
So what's the St. Louis legal market like? Do you have cases that are generated in St. Louis? Or are you still working on DC cases? What's happening there?
Yeah, so I mean, I work, you know, on cases all over. So not just in St. Louis. I'd say, you know, when I got back here, I didn't know really what to expect. But you know, there is an active ongoing grand jury investigation right now here in St. Louis, which that was like, I got a call about that last summer and got involved, and I was like, oh, we have one here. Like, I was like, this is exciting. There's also another Duke grad that's like an AUSA here that I met at one of the Duke meetings, and she does a lot of like healthcare fraud here. So we have like a huge, like there's tons of healthcare companies here in St. Louis. So there's stuff that stems out of that. There's also a lot of government contractors. So like Boeing, McDonnell Douglas, McDonnell Douglas was like based here. So there's like still a ton of Boeing people here. There was Express Scripts, which is now Cigna, which is like huge here. Obviously like Anheuser-Busch, which is now owned by InBev, but they have like a big presence here. So and also like big ag. There's like Bunge, which is like huge agricultural company, Rabobank. There's a lot of stuff here that, you know, kind of stems work. But you know, with the way that we practice, like, so our firm, you know, we practice across the country. We base it on what's your practice area, not where you are geographically. So like when we get big healthcare investigations or these tax investigations, like it doesn't matter where you are, we just get the right people involved. And then, you know, I have stuff right now in Alabama and DC. It's all across the board. So
I want to shift a little bit and talk about what it's been like to be as a woman in this practice area. Most of the women in white collar were part of the Women in White Collar organization. We all know each other. Marisol is actually one of our South Florida chapter leaders for Women in White Collar Defense. And so it's like a little bubble amongst us. But sometimes, practicing and playing in the greater field is a little bit of a challenge. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like, being a woman and that, on a case, for example, on a case pitch, or being a woman on the investigative team, has been a little bit of a challenge to deal with all the other players? And how have you dealt with that?
Yeah. Well, so I have a couple of stories along the way. Like one, when I was the first summer associate, they were having a luncheon. I went in to the luncheon. I got there a little early, and there was like an older man there, and he's like, "Oh, honey, can you get me a coffee? Did you get everything set up?" And I was like, I'm like a summer associate here. I'm a lawyer. Like, I don't know what you're talking about." And I was like, okay. So that was like very early on. Then,
Did he apologize?
no, it was like,
Of course not.
really old man, like just, no, this, then like I had, a case where, there was this other, like the opposing counsel, older man, like snakeskin boots, like he's the plaintiff's lawyer, like really crazy guy. I get there and he's like, "Oh, like, who are you? Are you the paralegal?" And I'm like, "No, I'm a lawyer." Then he's like, "Oh, you're a lawyer?" He's like, "Oh, well, are you single?" And I was like, "No, I'm married." And he's like, "Oh, are you sure? Because I have like some sons and I can like,
Oh
you
my
know, you should
goodness.
like talk to my sons." And I'm like, "Okay, like, no, like what is going on here?"
Right.
Then there was like one other just funny story I was gonna mention, and now I'm drawing a blank about. Oh, yeah. So I mean, this has happened to me several times where, you know, if there's a woman involved in an investigation, like on the client side, it's very like touchy. I've been in like, an investigation, you have to ask tough questions and people get uncomfortable. And like I had one interaction like earlier on where I was just asking questions, like what we have to do. And like this lady complained about me saying that, oh, she was asking me too hard of questions and I don't want her on this matter anymore and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, I felt so defeated because I like the man that was there was asking the same questions, and like she went around me and like tried to get me off of it because I was asking questions, and I was like, how do I do my job? How am I supposed to do my job if that's like, I have to ask these questions. And so I've, that experience really changed the way that I approached it. And I mean, I will, an investigation, especially like if there's a woman on the other side, like take it so slow, like try to get to know her, try to build a friendship and a bond, and then like take the process like 5 steps back to be able to ask the questions, because for some reason, like a woman, like it's just weird, but like it comes across the wrong way. And so that has helped me just with like going very slowly and like, building that relationship before asking the questions. Whereas like my male colleagues can go in there and just start asking the questions and they don't get the same response. Like they don't get that backlash of like, why is this woman asking these questions like that? Like, I don't know if you guys have ever had that, but
Of course, we always have to treat, I think I always have to treat people differently, and I cannot act the same way that my male counterparts do. I don't know, Vanessa.
I think that there's my experience has been that they automatically assume that the men know what they're doing, especially if it is an older man.
yeah.
And they assume that they belong in the room and are asking the right things. And there's perceptions as soon as we walk in a room that are formed, whether they're conscious or unconscious, or the bias is real, or the person on the other end is acknowledging that it's a bias. But I think they have expectations in their head of what we can and can't do, without knowing our level of experience or what we can and should be doing. And so I think that's very much a struggle. And Marisol and I have spoken about this. Sometimes it helps to have a male colleague in the room if for no other reason, just to be a potted plant, right?
Mhm.
And it
Yeah.
shouldn't be that way. And it certainly shouldn't be that way with women, but sometimes it's harder dealing with women
Right.
for a variety of reasons that you mentioned.
Yeah. And sometimes too, I think that there's a perception if we're too aggressive, if a woman is too aggressive, there's a certain connotation with that.
Right.
Whereas I think that, men don't have to deal with that, or they can be they're assertive and we are another word that I probably shouldn't say on our podcast, but yes. So I think we all struggle with that. Lauren, I know I see the pictures of your kids in the background. You have
Yeah.
3 kids. How do you manage, your successful legal career and the 3 kids and your family?
And they're still little kids, I might add.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. So I have an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old. So, for about 7.5 years, I went on a flexible schedule where I was trying to work like 60 to 80%. I went up and down. Just trying to figure out like how I can manage that. That honestly ended up being harder than just doing what I'm doing now, which is full time, because it was harder to have like my own clients and really run with it because, I was trying to only work for part of the time. And really, I feel like this job it's just almost like you have to be all in. I mean, that like after experiencing that, like to really do it and find it more rewarding for me, I had to be all in. With that, I mean, and also it was harder when I was part-time because I only had childcare for the times that I needed. And so when stuff did come up and I needed to like be available, like I didn't have the childcare carved out on those times. So it was like I was like frantic, like, oh my God, I got to do this. And like, so it almost was like harder for me because I was trying to do it all, which I still am full-time, but now I have childcare in place. Like we have an au pair that lives with us, which has given us a lot of flexibility with just, things come up and sometimes you have to work at weird times and things change. And so like just having somebody that's here and available. I do have family in town. Also, I try to delegate out things that I just can't do. Like Instacart is my friend. So I love cooking. I love going to the grocery store and picking out those things, but it's like, it saves a ton of time just to have the stuff show up. And
we're not judging you. Marisol
yeah.
knows I live like on Uber Eats and Instacart, and I would not live without that. So
yeah. So I mean, I think just figuring out ways to delegate things that and it is, I would say it's hard because I'm kind of a control freak. Like I feel like we like, also, not totally a perfectionist, but kind of like I like things a certain way. And then it's like hard because if you have somebody else do those things, like it might not be exactly how you want, but you have to be okay with that. So, I think it's a struggle to like be like, okay, it's okay if it's not perfect. And like, yeah.
I'm not surprised to hear that the flex schedule didn't work. I laughed actually when you said it because there's been a ton of studies about this. Of flex schedules and should companies offer that to women. And I remember reading, I don't know if it was in the New York Times or where years ago, because I had thought about that too, that women should not do that because they end up working just as much and they're not getting paid for it. And then they're also, the employer has the perception that they're really part-time, but they're not because they're working
so they're
just
not
as much.
Serious.
Right. So it didn't surprise me to hear it. You just said something that I want to ask you about. You said that you're a control freak and it's hard to give that up. And I think Marisol and I, and a lot of women listening to this and men too, can relate to that. Someone had the observation of me that even when I leave town or I do something or I'm at a conference or I'm busy in trial, I leave very detailed schedules for my husband, almost as if he is like a 5-year-old. And it's so OCD. And they're like, well, can't you just leave and trust that he's got it? I mean, he's a professional, my husband, Lauren, he graduated Duke, like he's successful. And I find that hard. So I have to ask you, I know Corey's your husband and Corey's also a lawyer and he's very successful. But how do you all manage your professional lives? And do you do these things? And how do you deal with that balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes when I leave, I just like let it go. I'm like, I don't really care what happens back there as long as everybody's alive. Because if I did, I would like go nuts. Like I do like try to kind of map out some meals and like have some stuff available, but I also just am like, it's your turn to map out the meals and do this too. Like, and then, you know, when I get back, sometimes it is chaos, but I'm like, all right, but I try not to like think about it and let it bother me when I'm away, because otherwise like I'm just I just can't, like I'll just be too worried about that I can't focus on what I'm doing. So yeah, I mean I think it's taken me a while to just be like, okay,
Let it
yeah,
It's that
I
third
might
kid that
come
did it
back
to
to
you.
something crazy, but
go. Let it go. Yeah.
Yeah. So Vanessa told me you had an entire TV show cooking series on YouTube. What made you do that?
yeah, so when I moved to DC, this was like '06. Corey and I are both lawyers. Corey's my husband. We didn't know anybody in the town that was not a lawyer. And I was just like, I gotta meet some other people. Like this, I can't I can't just only know
We're not
lawyers,
fun?
only talk about law. Like DC is like law and politics. And I'm like, I do that all day at work. Like I want to talk about like fun stuff, like food, like what, like come on. Like I can't. I didn't, you know, growing up, I didn't know anyone that was a lawyer. I had no lawyer friends. Like, so I was like, this is like too serious for me. I need something else. And so there was a woman featured in the Young Lawyers magazine that started a cooking show in Texas. And I reached out to her and we've actually become like friends. Like we haven't met in person, but we're like internet friends. And she's like, oh, she's like, I started on public access television. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, that's interesting. So I went and and all this is pre-kids. It's just amazing what you can do when you have no kids and you have all this free time. So yeah, I went to the public access television network and I was like, how do I do this? How can I like, you know, create a show? Like I have this idea. And so then you go through like, I don't know, 8 weeks of classes on all about production. So I dragged Corey up there with me. I was like, we're doing this. And so you learn, you know, how to create a show, like scripts, you learn like editing, like camera stuff. And so we started a show there. And with that, we did this thing called bicycling where you could take your show and you could send it to other networks. So we were eventually on like 29 public access television networks all across the country and in Australia and New Zealand. And we got picked up by a national network. And then eventually we were on PBS in DC. And we did put some of the shows on YouTube too.
Yeah, I think you have 55. We checked. You have 55 videos on there. That's amazing.
Oh yeah. Well, so yeah, some of them are on there. And so, I mean, so we started with this bare bones crew of like, they were like volunteers there. And then eventually, as we started getting more networks and we got sponsors, and then eventually like I could pay people. And so we had like the crew that worked on Emerald Green show, which was in Baltimore. And so
That's
they
pretty
like
amazing.
how to like film cooking shows and like, then we were in DC. And so it was called Capital Cooking. And we were highlighting all the different cuisine and culture that you can find in DC. And so the embassies started wanting to get involved. And the first country to invite us to go film there was Iceland. And they're like, would you come like film here in Iceland, like highlight our chefs, like do all this
That's
stuff.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we did. And then other countries found out and they're like, we don't want to be left out. Like, will you come to Sweden? Will you come to Mexico? Will you come to Taiwan? Like, so we like went all over and like filmed these like shows all over the world. So I just really took like all my vacation time to go like do that. But honestly, I don't think I would still be in the law right now if it wasn't for that, because it was such a creative outlet that I needed.
Yeah.
And so it gave me that balance of like, okay, I can do a little of this and like express my creativity and then do law too. And so, yeah. So
I think it's amazing that you did that. I really do.
Thanks. No, well, it's just like what you guys are doing. You guys are doing something different that like, you know, you're not just, I mean, this is like a podcast. Like you're not just, I'm only doing law. Like you're doing something that you enjoy and able to like express that creativity. And I mean, I think that we need that. We,
Yes,
you know,
yes,
like
we
we
do.
need that.
To
You
stay
can't just
sane
only work.
in this
Mm-hmm.
profession, you need something.
Yeah.
So one question I'll ask you before we get to the really fun stuff, which we'll turn to in Marisol, I'll start with that. But, you know, we've mentioned Corey a couple times now, your husband, he's also successful. Laura, you've talked a little bit about how you balance having 3 young kids. How do you balance your marriage? Like, how do you deal with that as, you know, now that you guys do have 3 young kids, you're not able to travel and do the fun TV shows together. Like, how do you do that? Can you just tell our audience a little bit about, you know, what you do to keep that aspect of your life?
I mean, look, it's not always easy, right? You know, marriage is like a series of compromises, because it's like, you know, there might be something you want to do, and that means that somebody else does something different in their career, you know, like just even where you're moving. I mean, I think marriage is hard, and I think, you know, we try to work on it. I mean, we try to carve out time to be together. Being here in St. Louis has allowed us to go on like date nights and stuff, since my mom will come over and watch the kids and things like that. That's been huge. Also, just like taking a trip together, I feel like that just allows you to reconnect in a different way, to where there's not all this chaotic stuff around. You can just like be together and remember like why you decided to be together to begin with.
Yeah.
No, I mean, look, I mean, I think, you know, if you're in a marriage and you're like both super busy, like you kind of have to do that stuff to make it all work. But yeah, I mean, I think marriage is not easy, but it's definitely rewarding to have like that, you know, companion and friendship and all that. And you have to work on it just as much as you're working on everything else. Otherwise, you know, it's definitely something that's easier to put in the back burner because you're just so busy.
Yeah. Now we're going to move to the fun questions. What do you do today to express your creativity?
Probably like just cooking at home for my family, which, you know, I've always been doing that. I would just like put it on the blog and put it on Instagram and do all that stuff with Capital Cooking, but I just don't have as much time to do that part of it anymore. But I still like cook at least like 3 nights a week. And I find that my creativity, because I like come up with what I want to make, and then I come up with new ideas, and like we definitely like cook a lot of different things at home. Like, so we're always trying new recipes, and I think that's still like my creative outlet. Like I love it. I mean, it is time consuming to map it all out, but I think it's fun and I enjoy it. So that's probably my little creativity that I get right now.
Having traveled all over, having dined at some of the best restaurants, what's your favorite restaurant of all time?
Oh gosh. I feel like that's impossible.
Okay, you can give us some of the top ones.
So I mean, if I just think of a favorite that the flavors pop and everything, it's got to be Rosica in DC.
Okay. Yeah,
it's like
it's up there.
Indian restaurant that they just elevate it, and like, I mean, from the first time I went there, just like every time I go there, which I don't get to go that much anymore, but it's always good. And like, it's just like people that don't even, I mean, like Indian food, which we've had family and friends come to town. They're like, oh, I don't know about that, you know, and then they try it and they're like, oh, this is really good. So I think they've like just created that experience that everyone can enjoy. So yeah, probably Rosica.
It sounds like you've traveled all over the world. What's your favorite place to vacation?
I mean, Italy is still my favorite. I just love it there. There's so many, like the food is amazing. The wine is amazing. Just like the countryside, but then you have the cities, and like, there's so much energy there. Yeah, I really do love Italy.
Do you have any plans for the summer?
We're probably going to go visit some friends in Florida, and,
it's not Italy, but we tried to be a close second.
I love Florida too. And then we're probably going to do something out west. We're thinking like, you know, some type of mountains, hiking thing. We're trying to narrow that down, like where we're going to go.
Nice.
What's one thing you'll never be caught wearing?
Probably like a muumuu.
What's one vice you wish you could give up?
I saw you guys ask that for somebody else. I'm like, I don't know. I guess like, I mean, I do like, I try to eat healthy, but I definitely eat like just whatever I want, unhealthy things. So I'd say like, if I could just eat a little bit more clean, I mean, so probably like just eating really delicious things that are bad for you.
What's your favorite meal to cook at home?
Favorite meal to cook, probably, I don't know, like, that's a hard one. Probably something Italian, maybe like creamy chicken marsala and like pasta, with a good salad.
What's your favorite book?
Favorite book, probably Daisy Jones and the Six. Have you read that?
Yeah,
No,
that's a
I
good
haven't.
one.
Oh
Yep.
my God, it's so good. It's like, it's really good. And they just came out with a show on it on Prime.
Okay, well, you have to tell us what the premise is for those of us who haven't read it.
It's like they said it's like lightly based on Fleetwood Mac. It's like about a band and everything that happens and like band life. And there's like all these crazy like love stories and drugs but it's told from all these different perspectives. So it's just a really cool book. I like it a lot.
If you weren't a lawyer, what would you be doing?
I'd be a TV show host now. Yeah, no, if I'd be on Food Network. I don't know. I think like I would maybe start a business. Like I just have always felt entrepreneurial, and you get a little of that with law. Like if you're in a law firm to like try to like build your practice, but like just to start a business and like build it from the ground up and like really own all of it and like just feel proud that like I created this. Like, I don't know. I don't know what kind of business, but something.
Define yourself in 3 words.
Probably social, outgoing. Well, yeah. So maybe social, loving, and loyal.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice I've ever received. Probably just like be true to yourself.
If you could switch lives with one person for a day, who would it be?
Jeez. Maybe like Elon Musk.
For the money or something else, Lauren?
I
Like,
just
what,
see
what
what his
else?
life is like. I mean, it's like next level.
You
I
want to
don't
go to the
know.
moon? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, what are you doing that day? I don't know. It's got to be like crazy.
What's one talent you wish you had?
One talent I wish I had. Maybe to be like a trapeze acrobat.
Where do you see yourself 10 years from now?
I don't know. Maybe there's 2 things. Maybe either be like an equity partner and have like a leadership role in the law firm and really work on mentoring like other young lawyers to help them along the way, or not be in the law at all and just start some type of business and like try to do that entrepreneurial thing. Like, I don't know. It just all kind of depends on how things shake out. Like if I'm still really happy and like what I'm doing here, I would want to keep going that path. But if I decide I don't like it anymore, like I wouldn't mind just like trying to do a business and like do something cool.
I vote for the latter, and I think you should start an Italian wine bar. I'll come visit.
All right.
Last question. What is one piece of advice you would give young women entering the legal profession?
I would give a piece of advice to find a good mentor and maybe somebody not where you work that can kind of be a mentor along the way through, just not like they have to be available all the time to you, but just a sounding board when you make big decisions. Like easier said than done, but just trying to find somebody that can fulfill that role for you.
Well, this has been fun. We've reached 36. There's tons more we can ask you, but this has been great, Lauren. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and
Now,
thank you
we've
guys
learned-
for doing this, because I think it's really great. And I think, you know, sharing these stories, it's interesting for everyone. So I really appreciate that you guys are doing that, because I like listening to them.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. We've learned so much about you. So thank you for doing it. Bye-bye.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye.